So looking back, how close crime was coming within my own boundaries and within my own family, and to know this lady, and that, they find her in a dumpster, dead. How to live with this detailed and this information and understanding it, it was very complex at the time. Looking back at that period when, you'd come home and bring my big camera into the house and set it beside my bed, and sometimes, you would wait for a phone call in the middle of the night. I remember one night waking up and there were arsons, that two men were going around the west side setting these fires, and you wake up in the middle of the night, you're out there watching the fires burn, but you learned as a cameraman, when you went to the fires, you always shot the crowd. And so there were 4 or 5 different fires that one happened after the other. And finally, on one of these, they went down, they were lighting cushions with gas on them and throwing them into these garages or old houses that were vacant. And they had thrown this gas-covered cushion into a garage, and it was on fire. And we had police scanners in the car so we could run and catch up. So the police had seen them, and they went to grab them in the car. And I remember coming up right behind the police, because you're on their tail trying to get this shot. And the men were masturbating. And they pulled them out, and I didn't, at the time, I was still in my car, and I'm looking stunned at these men being pulled out of the car half naked and getting their jollies or getting off on just lighting fires. And the funny thing is, because I'd shot all the fires, the police had come the next day to confiscate the tape, and they had evidence that these guys were in every shot of each fire. They were there watching the fire. But they had to prove in court that we had to actually see them light the fire, and they couldn't prove that they were lighting the fires. They didn't have the evidence, so the guys got away, and they walked away free. And when you see these people walking from a courtroom back into society, it's like, wow, the dangers of this mentality going back into our community and knowing someday somebody's going to be hurt by it. It was a very eye-opening time about who we are, how far we can take things. And I still look back and think that although on the way you're following these criminals, you met wonderful people. And that's the reality of our society, is most people are good. And without the good people along the way, you could never ever follow this path of these criminals. But as a man, it was the most difficult time realizing how men act, I guess, in the physical way, and how far they will go to relieve or to be connected to their feelings, obviously, that they were so cut off that they have to go to these extremes to be able to touch and feel, I guess. So it was a very sad time and a very powerful time as we sort of grew past, I think we grew past it. And hopefully someday that exposure makes people more aware, that we can grow beyond and understand and capture these people before they commit the crime and give them some kind of treatment. But it's a difficult time. Also during that period I covered these prison riots, and at the BC Penitentiary, where they spent 3 days rioting at the prison, and we got to go in right after they sort of locked it down and got everybody back in their cells, and we would go in and witness what was going on in those days. They were very liberal about letting the cameras in. But we went inside the prison right after they were like 3 days just wrecking the place, and they were prying the bars from the cells loose. And so when they get one bar loose, they'd use it to pry the other bars till they popped, and then they'd take the bars and they'd smash their toilets, their sinks, their beds, and they kept prying the bars. But when you went in and looked down the hall, down the corridor, the bars were all twisted like it was melted plastic. But the energy and the violence of the people screaming at you as a cameraman, you had to turn that light on, and they were just so turned up, you know what I mean, so cranked up, and they were screaming at you. But if I remember seeing Silence of the Lamb, and that scene of her walking down where there was 4 prisoners, and then I kept visualizing, well, I walked down, there must have been 300 prisoners screaming at you with that camera on in those days. But it was like you were, with the camera, you were kind of isolated and protected. So you had no fear about what you were doing, but the impact of what you were doing obviously had a great deal upon my upbringing and of my own family. And without nature, without the great white mountain that sort of exposes itself beyond all of us, I don't think I would have survived. I think I would have bailed from that job after a few years of that. But knowing that, sitting out here, just looking out at the mountains, sitting out here watching in nature and being surprised by nature. You know, all of a sudden a herd of sea lions just went by, and they're on their way to their feast, and some eagles flew by earlier and I was sitting here. So it's just watching. The eagle just flew off his post. There's an eagle that actually lives on this island over here that has a perch, and he's now flying. He sits there, and that's his perch, and this is mine. So my perch, it brings me my peace.